I think Avenue AR is the first good idea to come along since the cassette roulette thing. And that was back in the 90s. When that went away, there really wasn't a great avenue for songwriters to submit songs anymore to A&R people, unless you just like attach an MP3 to an email and hope for the best. And I think for an A&R person too, an A&R person, their resource is the songwriting community. They need a songwriting community in order to find great material for the artists on their roster. That's their job, artists and repertoire. They have an artist, they need to find the repertoire for the artist. They need to put those two together. The perfect marriage of an artist with a producer and a songwriter and a song. That's basically what A&R is all about. And that kind of went away with the Songwriter Showcase. It's like a lot of A&R people in the 2000s, for example, they have a small contingent of writers that they work with for every artist that they do, because they don't have that outreach anymore to other songwriters. So unfortunately, and this might be just my opinion, but a lot of the music that comes out of these things, it's like no matter how many different artists they are, all the records tend to sound a little bit the same. There's a sort of a sameness because it's the same writers and the same producers on every record. And so now with Avenue A&R, I think songwriters and producers now have a direct access to the A&R community, but the A&R community also now has a bigger outreach to more songwriters and more producers. So they have access to more material, more content. And it's a win-win for both sides, really. Because being able to get your music heard is the first step in making a living as a songwriter. What used to be considered unsolicited material basically is now being solicited by Avenue AR. So everybody has an opportunity to submit their songs and get feedback. So even if you're not going to have your song picked up for an artist, you're at least getting feedback from these A&R people, which is invaluable for a songwriter to understand the way A&R people think, the kind of music they look for. What about your song don't they like? What about your song do they like? To understand all that is very valuable information, so that when we go in the studio to write new songs and make new demos, we kind of have a sense of, is he going to like this or is he not going to like this? You know what I mean? Because we've already got feedback from them on other songs. So it's a learning experience for the songwriter. And just like any learning experience, I mean, if you were to go to school or take classes, you got to pay a fee for that. So Avenue AR is no different, but you are getting feedback. And if you have the right song for the right artist, you will most likely get picked up. It will be heard. And if it works, it's going to get picked up and it's going to be used, just like they did in cassette roulette. If a guy heard the song that he wanted for his artist, he took it, he used it. A lot of those songwriters got their first cuts out of cassette roulette, and they became, superstar songwriters. It would have, if Avenue AR existed in the 80s, it would have been so valuable to me because, for all the reasons I basically just said. I mean, just the learning experience. It's like, okay, if I write a song that you don't like, I want to know why you don't like it. And that's going to help me on the next song I write. I do have some relationships with A&R people that, I don't want to mention anybody's name at this point, but there's this one guy who, he writes really long emails critiquing the songs I sent. And I got to tell you, it's like a masterclass in songwriting reading his emails. Most songwriters might be disappointed that he doesn't like your song, but I'm learning why he doesn't like the song. And when I write another song for him, I'm going to use that information, and hopefully, eventually, I'll write something that's going to really click with him. The A&R people that I know that are already involved with Avenue A&R are all incredible people. I mean, we mentioned Kenny Commissar because he sort of gave me my start. He's incredible. I mean, he started out working in Atlantic, then he worked at Epic with Michael Jackson, then he worked with Justin Timberlake. I mean, the guy is a legend. He knows his stuff. He's a great songman. He can definitely hear when a song is a hit. Jeff Fenster is another guy. I mean, all the hits that he found for Jive Records when he was working for Jive. I mean, the guy's a legend. Rich Christina, a great guy from Sony Music Publishing. I mean, these are people that know hits. They know hits when they hear them. And when they don't hear them, they know how to sort of tell a songwriter what to do to fix them or to become better at the craft of writing songs. And so these are really, really important A&R people that hopefully the business will continue to nurture and to allow to keep working, because they're responsible for so much good music that's out there. Well, okay, so being a songwriter myself, I approach Avenue AR as a songwriter. But I understand that it's also going to be a very valuable source for unsigned artists to try and find ways to get record deals or to get heard by A&R people. Because, we keep talking about submitting songs for other artists. But if you're an artist looking for a deal, Avenue AR is just a great direct resource. You could get your stuff directly to the A&R people who can sign you. And, these labels really know how to develop new artists, in terms of how to develop an artist's career. Because it's not just about the music. Sometimes it's about marketing, promotion, live performance, every social media, everything that an artist has to do to become a superstar. These record companies know how to develop an artist to do that. And so to get to those companies, you have to go to the A&R departments. And to get to the A&R departments, you need a resource. And I think Avenue A&R is that resource right now. It's the only one, really. Yeah, I do, actually, because gone are the days of A&R people going to clubs every night trying to find bands. I mean, if this works, Avenue A&R will be the future of discovery, of how artists are discovered by record companies and by A&R executives. This is a fantastic resource. Like I said, it's a win-win on both sides. For the creative talent that's looking to get discovered, and for the A&R executives whose job it is to bring superstars to their record companies. I mean, this is a fantastic source. And if it becomes successful, I don't know if I were an A&R person, I don't know why I would want to use any other source for finding talent. I mean, this is it. And I just hope it blossoms into something really, really important for the industry. It could be a revolutionary, life-changing event for the music industry. What year is it now? 20, 21? I've been in the music business for over 30 years. Successfully, I would say, because prior to that, I thought I was in the music business. When I was in high school, I used to write songs for the school plays and stuff, but that wasn't really music business. That was just pretend music business. I think I've worked for literally all of them. I mean, in 30 years, you get around. My first opportunity as a producer was with Atlantic Records back in the 80s. I made a couple singles for them. Thank you, Ken Commissar. And then I developed an artist, signed her to Sony, worked for all the other labels, Capitol, Chrysalis, just because when you're independent, you're an independent contractor. And if you're a songwriter, you just basically try and find artists who want to record your songs. So they're spread out among all the other labels. Gone are the days of staff producers at a label like they used to have in the 60s with Atlantic Records and stuff like that. So now you could literally go from label to label with songs. And I literally worked for just about every label you can think of. Well, I think it's hard because, like I said, you never know if your email's been opened or received, if they're not going to respond to it. And all you really want them to do is listen to the song. You want to have an opportunity for that song to have been considered for a project. You just don't want to send it and think that they're going to delete the email or it's going to go to their spam folder. Wow. I've worked with a lot of artists. Where do I even start? I think one of my earliest successes would have been the original movie Top Gun in 1986. It was the first time I landed a song in a film. I got to write the song Hot Summer Nights for the soundtrack, and the artist who recorded that was Gloria Estefan with Miami Sound Machine. And that was a big deal for me because that was my first successful song. I had just signed to a publishing company. I was signed to Paramount Pictures as a writer through their publishing company. And I was a new writer. They took a chance on me. And Top Gun made so much money for me, it recouped my advance like 5 times. And so we renegotiated my deal, and I got a stronger deal, and we just moved on from there. And I started getting a lot of cuts with artists in the 80s, mostly R&B artists at the time, like Patrice Rushen, Shaka Khan, Evelyn Champagne King, New Kids on the Block. who am I forgetting? Stephanie Mills. Lots of people were cutting my songs. And the first opportunity I had to produce one of my, 'cause this was back in a time when the songwriters would write a song and then producers would produce the song for the record company. They usually weren't the same people. But that changed in the late 80s when home technology changed and songwriters were now making demos that sounded like records. So the record companies felt, well, we really don't need to hire a producer to reproduce this because this demo sounds like the record we want. So why don't we just have the songwriter produce it? And that happened to me with a group called Five Star, who was signed to RCA Records. And I produced 2 songs for their album, and it became my first hits as a producer as well. So now I wasn't just a songwriter, I was a writer-producer. And after that, with the credibility I had as a producer for Five Star, I decided I wanted to develop my own artists as a producer. And the first artist I discovered was a girl named Martika. She was on a Disney show called Kids Incorporated. And I saw her on set and I thought, this girl's fabulous, she should have a record deal. She was young, so I had to work through her mother. She was a minor, so I met with her mom and I said, I'd like to take her in the studio and do some demos with her. And we did. We did a few demos and I started to shop them around. And I didn't know what kind of response I was going to get, but it was a great response. I mean, everyone from Kenny Commissar was the first place I brought him. And he wanted it, and literally every label we went to wanted to sign her. So we had a bidding war going on. And eventually she signed at Columbia. And Tommy Mottola was the president then. And we made the record there. And they made it a hit. And it became, my first #1 was a song called Toy Soldiers, which was from that record. Martika's Toy Soldiers, which you might remember because about 15 years after that, Eminem recorded a version of it. He used the chorus, the hook, and he wrote raps around it and came out as like Toy Soldiers, and it was a hit all over again. So that was like winning the lottery for me. And then I also wrote songs for people like Celine Dion and Mandy Moore, Peter Allen, just a lot of people, a lot of great people I worked with. I'm blessed in that sense. Yeah, because I was doing, we signed Martika at a time in the 80s when the big thing with female pop singers was dance music. You had Debbie Gibson, you had Tiffany, you had Paula Abdul, all those people were like hitting it really big at that time. And I think Martika we were envisioning as that type of artist. So the record we made was like 90% dance music. And I just felt, when listening to the whole album, I thought we should do something different, just one song that's a little bit different than what all these other artists are doing, so it'll make Martika stand out a little more as more of a serious artist. And so I had this idea running around in my head about Toy Soldiers. I didn't know what it was going to be about. I didn't know what the song meant, but I kind of had the chorus in my head, and I sang it for Martika. And she liked it, and I said, we should write this. This could be something. I don't know what it's about. Does it mean anything to you? And she had a friend who was having a lot of drug problems at the time, and she wanted to write it about that person. And so it became like an anti-drug anthem. And the record company, everybody we were working with felt that they were contracting for a dance album and a dance artist. And it's like Toy Soldiers wasn't exactly the song that everybody was focusing on. They were like, yeah, let them put it on the album. They like it, we'll just leave it on the album. But Sony Music thought I was crazy when the bills started coming in. I was like, I want to put a children's choir in this chorus, and where are you going to get a children's choir? So Martika had all these friends from Kids Incorporated who were all really successful, professional, young actors and singers. Among them was a girl named Stacey Ferguson who became Fergie from the Black Eyed Peas. She's one of the girls who's in the children's choir on Toy Soldiers. And also Rasan Patterson, who's a very big R&B artist. And a lot of other people from Kids Incorporated who came to our aid at that time because they were all friends with Martika. And they came in the studio and we did this children's choir and everybody thought I was nuts. I'm putting a children's choir in this like slow ballad about drug addiction, and everybody thought I was crazy. So, but they let us have our moment on the album as like our one artistic moment. And when we delivered the album, they released a pop dance song as the first single, a song called More Than You Know, which did okay. Martika shot a video for it, she went out and promoted it, and everything was fine. But man, in our hearts, we just kept thinking, Toy Soldiers, that's the song that we want to release. And I didn't sense that the record company was feeling that song at all as a single. So I remember going to my friend Mark Benish, who was a big radio promotion person for Sony Music at the time. And I'm like, can you do anything for us on this? Can you maybe test it in some markets, in the middle of the country or something, just spike it with some radio stations or something. And he said, let me try it, and he did it. He went around everyone's back because nobody at the label wanted Toy Soldiers to be a single, but Mark found some radio stations that were really going to support it, and he sort of forced the issue. So Sony ended up releasing Toy Soldiers as the second single, and the rest is history. It went straight to #1. Well, I'm from Chicago, so my career kind of started in Chicago. And I didn't know then that I was going to be a songwriter or a music producer. I knew I wanted to be in the music business, but I wasn't sure in what capacity. And I was just a fan of music, a huge fan of not just artists, but songwriters as well. Because I would always read the credits on record labels. I wanted to know who was behind the songs I was listening to. And a lot of my most favorite songs weren't necessarily being written by the artists who were performing them. So I discovered this community of songwriters. On my favorite songs, the same names would keep popping up, like Peter Allen or David Foster. Every time I would like a song, I'd look at the label. I'd say, who wrote this? And then their names were there. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And in a sense, that's something that A&R people always, that was an A&R function, basically, is to marry the best songs and songwriters with the artists who are on their rosters. And so I thought that would be the good job for me to have. And being in Chicago, there weren't very many record companies that were headquartered in Chicago. There was one, though, and through some personal connections of my father, I ended up getting a job there. And it was the company run by Curtis Mayfield, who's like a civil rights R&B music icon. Remember Superfly, Freddie's Dead, all that stuff. So I ended up getting an A&R position at Curtis Mayfield's label, Curtom Records. That was my first legitimate job in the music business. And that was a fun time too, because Curtis had a lot of artists on his roster. And, it was necessary to find material for these artists to record. People like Linda Clifford or Ava Cherry, and there was a lot of great music being made out of there. It was the headquarters of Chicago R&B music. And that was my first job as an A&R guy. And when that job ended, there weren't any other record companies in Chicago. They kind of closed up the company. And so I felt if I was going to continue on as an A&R person, I needed to move to New York or LA. And since I like the weather in LA better, I decided to move to LA. And I came out here and I thought, well, I just had this great A&R position with Curtis Mayfield. It'll be easy for me to get another A&R position. And it wasn't. I knocked on the doors of every record company in town trying to get an A&R position, and there just either wasn't any available or there wasn't any interest. So I was out here, I moved out here, and now I have no job. I have expenses, and I've got nothing to do, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I discovered this place called the Los Angeles Songwriter Showcase, which was a small community where all these songwriters would go every week, and there'd be a roulette wheel. It was called cassette roulette. And you could put your demo on a cassette in the roulette wheel, and every week an A&R guy would come and sit there on stage, and they'd spin the wheel. And when it landed on your song, they would play the song anonymously, and the A&R guy would listen to it. He was usually looking for songs for any number of artists on his roster. And he'd listen to the song, and he'd say yay or nay, right there on the spot. He'd be up on a stage, and we'd be in the audience, and we'd actually be able to see the reaction, how he's reacting to these songs. And in a weird sort of a way, being able to see that helped us, because when I would go in the studio and cut demos of my songs, I'd think about that in my mind. I'd think about the way A&R people react to the songs and how I'm able to watch them do that in real time when they're listening to it. So that was very helpful. But it actually taught me a lot about songwriting, and it helped me connect and hook up with a lot of the other songwriters who were doing that at the time. And a lot of big songwriters got their start at this thing. I remember I used to see Diane Warren there, and Alan Rich and Billy Steinberg. They all used to come to this songwriter showcase, the Cassette Roulette. And I met a lot of people through that. Alan Roy Scott, just a lot of great songwriters at the time. And eventually I started writing with some of them. And I remember I met David Foster and Jay Graydon at this thing. And I ended up interning for Jay Graydon. And I ended up writing with David Foster. And, these are people I idolized. And here I am working with them. So that kind of was my transformation from wanting to be an A&R person into really wanting to be a songwriter and a producer.